People can come in. And thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to this training on the ArchivesSpace Public User Interface, often called PUI. Today, we're taking an in-depth look at how the public interface works, what researchers see, and how you can use it effectively at your institutions. My name is Susannah Broyles, and I'm the metadata archivist at the Whitliff Collections at Texas State University, and I'm going to be one of your trainers today. I'm joined by my co-trainer, Brittany. Brittany, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining from?
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Newberry. I am the Music and Popular Culture Archivist at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome everyone. Happy to be here.
And we are also joined by Margaret Kidd, who is our trainer in training this session. Margaret will be monitoring the chat throughout the session and will join us later for our discussions about how we use our PUIs at our institutions. Margaret, do you want to introduce yourself and let us know where you are joining from?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am Margaret Kidd, and I am at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, where I serve as the Senior Curator for Health Sciences in the Special Collections Department.
Excellent. So before we dive in, I just want to cover a few logistics. If you like, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, institution, and what the weather is like where you are today. And so prior to this session, you should have received an email with an agenda. This agenda includes links to all the materials you'll need for today, as well as resources you can use after the webinar. At the top of the agenda is a link labeled Course Materials, which includes the quick start guide and additional references. We'll drop that link into the chat. So we may not follow the agenda exactly, but we will take breaks at the scheduled times. And finally, there's a link to a training evaluation in the agenda, and we would really appreciate it if you're able to complete that after the training. As you can tell, we're using Zoom webinars today, so your microphone and camera are turned off. If you have questions at any point, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen so we don't miss them. If you have general comments or need assistance, please feel free to use the chat. We'll answer questions live during scheduled Q&A times, but we may also type responses directly into the Q&A, so please keep an eye on that. For this training, we are using the latest version of ArchivesSpace, which is version 4.1.1. And if your institution is using an earlier version, some features that you'll see today may look a little different or may not be available yet. Unfortunately, we are not able to troubleshoot individual local implementations in this session. If you run into technical issues with your ArchivesSpace instance, please email archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. That address is listed in your agenda and we'll also put it in the chat. And please keep in mind that participants in this training come from many different institutions and all have a wide range of experience levels. The ArchivesSpace Code of Conduct applies to all ArchivesSpace events, including trainings. So please be considerate and respectful in your interactions today. And so just to recap the learning objectives for what we are hoping that you will be able to do by the end of the workshop is navigate the ArchivesSpace public user interface, use subject and agent records to link related materials, make a request to customizations to the PUI, and instruct staff and researchers on how to use the interface. If you haven't taken an ArchivesSpace Basics workshop before, some of this content may feel new. Recorded basics sessions are available on YouTube for additional background as needed. The session is also being recorded, so you'll be able to review it later. And so let's get started. Before I start sharing my screen, um, I am a naturally fast talker, so I'm doing my best to talk slowly, but if at any point you need me to repeat something, please let me know. Okay, so let's get into this. I'm quickly just gonna make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. L- Besides lots and lots of snow. Okay, so let me start sharing my screen. And that's not what I wanted to do, but give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so before we get into the details, I just wanted to start with a quick visual orientation. So most researchers interact with the PUI in three main spaces: the homepage, which you're seeing now, search and browse results, and the collection level record, where you can explore series, photos, and items. So we'll be coming back to those pages throughout today's session. So what you're looking at now is um, the default out-of-the-box ArchivesSpace public user interface. There are no logos, no custom text, and no design changes applied. If you've seen other institutions' interface that look very different, that's because they've added customization. Brittany will talk more about that later. And hang on, let me just have my chat. Um, okay. So what the PUI actually is. So this is the built-in public user interface that publishes much of what you create on the staff side. In general, anything with a published checkmark in the staff interface can appear publicly once the record is saved. Some records, such as subjects, are published automatically, while other fields never appear. Um, if you're looking to see what records are published and what's not, that is available if you're a member on the ArchivesSpace Help Center. And so before one last thing to note, really want to emphasize that using the PUI is completely optional. Some institutions use it as a primary public access point, while others export uh, archive space data into EAD, Mark XML, or other systems. All of these approaches are completely valid. The goal of today's training is to help you understand how the PUI works so you can decide what makes the most sense for your institution. Okay, so let's start with how the information from the staff side gets into the public side. So what we're going to do is go into collections, and you can kind of see how the browse already works. Because it is winter and it is cold, let's go into the Krispy Kreme corporate records. And if you scroll all the way down and you move your Zoom stuff, you can go directly into the staff interface. And usually it takes you where you're going, but not always. So we're going to go into the Krispy Kreme corporate records resource, and we're going to edit it. And let's say that we actually found out that the collection dates are actually from 1929 to 2009, which let's change that. And let's also add a note. Maybe we just discovered that there was something in the collection that has harmful language. So let's do a general note, and let's see, spelling correctly always helps. Okay, and you can see these two published checkboxes. I'm going to click on both of those and then save the resource. And you can see up here, there's an additional button that says Publish All. I like to always double check and push that button. However, remember that if you are using ArchivesSpace to house internal notes, use that button with caution. So I'm going to publish all, and it gives me a nice little reminder. And then we think about things and view published. Okay, so immediately we can see that the edit for the date worked. And instead of 1932, it is now 1929. And also in this additional description field, a general note that this collection contains harmful language is present. So really that just shows how quick that the PUI can update. And so basically as soon as you save a record on the staff side, it will go live publicly. And that staff to public connection is really at the heart of how the PUI works. Okay, I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Yes, and Margaret has a really good point that it can take a few minutes for that changes to show up. Um, just give it time. Okay, so going back to the PUI, so as a bonus hint, clicking on this link of the logo on the upper left-hand side always takes you back to the home page. So now that we've seen how information gets into the public interface, let's zoom out and look at what users can actually browse. So the PUI provides access to repositories, collections, digital material, the digital objects, the digital objects in the staff side, unprocessed material, which are the accession records, and subjects names, which are agents, and collection groups, which are classifications. And also through these records, you can gather information about containers. So you can see how those tabs that correspond to each of those record types, and that is something that Brittany will talk about later. So what I really love about this is that this design, at least to me, really promotes exploration. Basically, everything in the PUI is a link to something else. So let's kind of delve into browsing. So let's see. As I said, all of this is clickable. So let's start with repositories. If you click there, you can see all the repositories in this instance, along with a number of collections that each house. And so if you want more information about the Allen Doe Research Center, you can click on it. And again, my Zoom is in the way. And you can see that it has 11 collections, 7 digital materials, 82 subjects, and so on. So really, it's a great overview of what that repository holds. And you can add additional information like contact information, overviews, and everything else on the staff side, and it will appear here. One thing that you should note, every instance can have as many repositories as needed, and they'll all appear in the repositories tab. Going across the top, collections, there we go. My internet is not the best right now, so bear with me. Collections, it displays all the collections across all repositories. On the right-hand side, you will see additional filters that you can use to narrow down your browsing. And you'll also see that you can do keyword searching within these results. And you can also sort everything by title, year, and identifier, ascending or descending as you wish, but the default is always relevance. Um, so just as a quick note, all of these additional filters are based on the metadata that you've entered and published. So these will be completely unique to whatever your collections have. And so really it all ties back to good description on the staff side directly improves usability on the public side. So this is a really good way just to make sure that you are using your subjects and agents to a degree that makes sense for your institution. Okay, so going back to our friends at Krispy Kreme, I kind of wanted just to give you a overview of what happens when you click into a collection record. But this is the part of ArchivesSpace that really showcases the archival hierarchies and everything else that we as archivists rely on so much. So this is the pages where both staff and researchers will spend the most time in, most likely. So basically, this is the digital version of our finding aid. You can see the hierarchies on the left, and you can click down into them and see just how it works. And so this is one of the most important part is the hierarchical organization of the collections with series, subseries, files, and items. And this really allows users to see the overall structure at a glance. Okay. And jump to series and photos and maintain context. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. So let's go back to um, browsing and searching. I think I got kind of excited about this, so let me go back to what I'm actually covering. Okay, so browsing. It's really fantastic a way to approach the collections is to browse by subjects. And hang on, I just got very okay. And so really in this way you can click on this, click on any subject and go to the collection. And that is one of the best ways that if somebody is just looking for an overview, that to get into what they're looking for. And again, you can do filters by repositories. And so, as for an example, my repository is actually, I'm going to wait till we talk about our individual repositories. I am so sorry, y'all. I have apparently had too much coffee today. Okay, and the same thing is true for um, names. And so you can really see that you can tell the organizations, the people, and that are included in these collections. And really, it's a wonderful way to get, again, an overview of what is included in your collections. Okay, so now we are going to find the really cool search functions. Okay, so there are two main types of searching in the PUI, basic and advanced. So basic search, as we all know, is really just keyword searching. So Google searching, basically. So let's say we wanted to find all the photos in these collections. We could type photo and let's see what we get. We get 8 results. And what's really cool is one of the usability upgrades in these latest versions is that the search term is highlighted in the results, so it's found in the notes in these collections. And then you can also go into the Allen, and you can see that it's found in the Allen Doe Research Center. So really, it gives you a fantastic overview of where it is, and let's see, and how it applies. But once you click in that, obviously the highlighting does not apply anymore because that would be a little bit too. Anyway, okay, so that is basic searching. And what you can also do, of course, is do a truncated search. So with photo, you can search that, and you get results that include um, photographed, anything that's a truncated version of anything that photo is a truncated version of. So this is a really good way to get a broader list of results. And again, you can the usual hierarchy of results, uh, collections, and you can see collections. Well, that term is found, and then once you get past the collections, hang on, you then go to subjects, files, digital records, and all of that. So that's kind of the basic hierarchy for results. Um, okay. And within that, you can filter results by all of these different filters: repository, type, subjects, language. And then if you only are looking for archival objects, you can click on that and you will get 44 um, collect archival objects. And one thing I really do want to showcase is the amazing clickable um, breadcrumb trail. So all like I said earlier, the links in the UI are fantastic. So by clicking on any of these, we can go to that collection. And again, just showing off all the things. Let's see. And if we go back, and then you can always undo that filter by clicking the X. And let's see. So I just want to make sure that I'm just like browsing, you can change the sort auto and apply filters. Again, relevance, title, date, year, identifier. You can all make those search results work best for you. So the one limitation to note is that you can only click on one additional filter. If you want to combine multiple subjects, the best way is to use advanced searches. Oh, and as a quick side note, users can enter keywords with or without diacritics. The searching will pull up both. So if we go back, okay. So let's say that we want more than just photos. So let's make it as broad as possible with the asterisk. And then you can add a row here. And this is where the Boolean operators come in. You can say and, or not. So in this case, let's say and along with any kind of photos, let's look for prints. And we can also limit by only collections, only digital materials. Oh, really just get really granular with our yields. But let's see what photos and prints will get us. So in all record types, the keywords of photo and print come up with 6 results. And again, the highlighting in the search page is very helpful. And so you can see again the usual hierarchy of results, the collection, subjects, and then archival objects. And again, if we wanted it to do by year descending, clicking south is always helpful. It will do that. The one thing to note with the setting by year is that this is all based on the top level of dates. Um, okay, and the other advanced search trick that I'm sure all of you know, but I'm just going to make sure that it's on record, are quotes. So let's just do photographs. And you can see that we get 39 results with actual photographs as the search term. So you can really just see how like robust the searching is. Let me just make sure I've covered everything that I wanted to. Does anybody have any questions so far while I'm looking through all of my notes? So one thing before I give this over to Brittany is I want to show just how you can see all the different kinds of records in the navigation. So really quickly, here you can see that digital objects are listed right in the left-hand fields as well. And let's see. Record groups are an optional thing that you can classify like materials. I will show it off when I show off my PUI at the end of the session. And really, just again, one thing I want to stress is when in doubt, click. And so the collection overview is what we've been looking at. It has additional descriptions, all the notes that mirror exactly what's listed in this on the staff side, including subjects, genre film, and topical subjects, and all of the admin information. But there's other ways to view things. So again, you can really just focus more on the collection organization, which basically is just series descriptions. And again, you can load all the records all at once or as you scroll. For larger collections, I always recommend to do it as you scroll because depending on your internet connection, it could take a very long time. Um, my favorite way to look for things is actually through the container inventories. So for each record, you can browse box by box. So if you go into box one, you can see that the box one of the Krispy Kreme Corporation records in and contains these objects and materials. And it's just a really good way to see what is around the objects that you're looking for. And then you can also just view the digital material in this collection. And And process collections, like I said, are accession records, and that is totally up to you if you want to display them or not. And that will also be something that Brittany covers. And I feel like I ran through this really quickly. So if you have any questions, want me to show something again, please let me know. Um, a few things that I do want to mention before I hand it over is the future directions of the PUI. So one thing I that you may have seen is that you can use there is a built-in translation tool for the application. So French, German, Japanese, and Spanish. How this only translates the website itself, not the archival content. So it's a great way to get more people looking at your material. However, unless the description is matches that, it's not as it's still an obstacle. However, there was some really fantastic work happening behind the scenes right now in ArchivesSpace development. One is actually allowing multilingual archival description within a single resource record. That means that, hang on. So you can see here how this record has all of the archival description in Spanish, which is fantastic. If you go back and go and it's the same collection in English. What we're working on doing is getting all of that information in one resource record, which will be super exciting. And that is being worked on at the moment. Another thing that is currently in the works, and it's still very early days for this project, but is bringing more PUI customization into the staff interface. It's still really early days for the project, but it's especially promising for smaller institutions since it will make it so much easier to control the look and feel of the PUI without having just make it a lot easier. And progress will be shared about both of those projects through all the official ArchivesSpace channels. So please keep an eye out for that. And I think that pretty much covers it. And if you have any questions, comments, now's the time. And let's see. Okay. As I was expecting, we are running a little bit early. So do y'all want to take a break now? Brittany, how are you feeling? Do you want to start with your section? I'll take a break first.
Let's take a short 10-minute break.
Let's do that. It is 35 past the hour, so let's meet back here at 45 past the hour. Thank you so much. See y'all soon.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm about to share my screen. I'll share my screen and then we'll get started. Okay, so let's talk about the collection types in the ArchivesSpace public user interface. So I'm going to show you the various tabs up here and then get a little bit more in depth with our collection records and what they look like. So If you have more than one repository in ArchivesSpace, it will be featured under the repository tabs. So all of these tabs are not required when using the public user interface, and you can choose which ones appear. So that's a little customization for you. And we'll get more into customizations after we go over collection types. So if you have repositories, it usually means that you have more than one repository and you would like to allow your users to be able to choose collections from the different repositories. So say you have special collections, which are separate from your university archives, and you want to make sure people are aware of that and that they can just see what's available in the university archive. At Georgia State University, we have two repositories, our special collections and then our university archives and records, so that people can just choose to look in that repository. But we don't actually have the repository tab available because of it being something that can be used in the search as a filter, right? As you saw. But if you like people to know, hey, when I see this repository, when I click on it, it has 11 collections, 7 digital materials, which those are your digital objects that you create on the staff side, right? Process materials, meaning accessions. There's 82 subjects that were created and tied to the collections and records in this repository. It doesn't mean that there's 82 subjects fully in this public user interface. If you remember, subjects and agents, which are named, can be created in any repository, but they are available to any of the repositories. So it's not repository specific, and that you do not want to duplicate them when creating them. So if one repository already created, say, a photograph subject, you don't want to recreate it in another repository because it will appear as something that you can choose and link to your record. Same with agents. And then you can see how many record groups. Record groups refer to classifications. And you, from this repository page, can choose to search just within the repository. So you don't have to search both repositories that are available or however many. You can choose to search just in here. If you want to know what else is in the repository, you can click and see just the collections in this repository. Again, you're able to do the different browse and filter options that we saw earlier. And so you're able to see which collections were linked to this repository. Just how you, when you do a general search, can see it's found in this repository, this collection, that kind of thing. There are several places that they're like consortiums, and rather than having multiple applications of ArchivesSpace, they just have one application and multiple repositories. So they share the same instance of ArchivesSpace and then create multiple repositories. So things are shared subject to names, but not collections and digital objects and that kind of thing, as well as classification. So you can do that if you're a consortium, have multiple repositories, or if you're at an institution that has multiple libraries and archives, you can do that as well. Have the repositories represent those libraries. So you can consider that when using the public user interface. So when we see it, when we just click on the tab, you're only seeing the name of the repository and the number of collections in that repository. If that repository is tied to a parent institution and you've entered that field when filling out repository information on the staff interface, you will see that here, like Jane Smith Special Collections Archives is a part of example university parent institution. Worked really hard on that one. So let's go back and let's look at collections. Again, when you're browsing, we already talked about that. But if you were to click on a collection, as Susannah mentioned, there are multiple things that you see when you're in a collection record. One of the most recent updates to collection records is to move collection organization and search, everything that's on the left here, all of this stuff was moved from the right to the left because of how we read, right? Majority of us using ArchivesSpace will probably read left to right. And so the default is to now have it on the left side as something to be aware of. When you're looking at a collection record, you will note that it identifies where it is in the hierarchy. So if you're at the top collection level, you get that information. It gives you a little icon indicating that it's a collection. That's what the red box means. It will give you the identifier, which is the unique letter or numerical combination that you gave to a collection. I always tell students when they're looking at a collection record that the title is something that does not have to be unique. A title of a collection does not have to be unique in ArchivesSpace for you to be able to save it. What has to be unique is the identifier. So whenever they are wanting to find that collection again and make sure it's that collection, they need to note this identifier. So if you're on the SAS side and you're creating these and you get an error for identifier, it's probably because you've already created that identifier before. So be aware of that. And be aware of that when you're teaching people about using ArchivesSpace, right? Which we'll kind of get into later when we talk about different case studies and how we've used ArchivesSpace with reference and teaching staff. But I always want to point out that the identifier is always unique at the collection level. It can be the same as others when you get into series and subseries because you're usually repeating numbers and letters that are being used in other collections. So totally understandable in ArchivesSpace that those would be the same, but when you're looking just for this collection, they need that identifier. So it will start the breadcrumbs for you, right? And then at the collection level, it's important to note that there are 3 buttons. Why isn't my button on? Okay, there's 4 buttons that can appear when you are on the collection level. I'm going to show you 3 that are currently here now. One of them is not turned on. By default, it's usually not turned on. And that is the request button. And I'll go to my my institution's repository to show you the request button. And I'll go to one other because there's different ways you can use the request button. So at the collection level and at the series and file and subseries level, you'll always get a citation button. This citation is set up by you, the staff members, the archivists, the people using ArchivesSpace, and is not formatted in a specific style format. So if students are using Chicago style or research are using MLA, APA, whatever they're using, they need to take this data and change it to fit their style format. So you make them aware of that. You're just entering information that you know needs to be in that citation, not in the style that people typically use. So you can choose how it looks. So typically people want people to identify the item, the date, the collection, the identifier, what box and folder it's in, and then the library it's from and the institution. Thus, it has 2 available for you because it allows you to cite just the item. But if people are using it a certain way and need the link, it will generate the link for you in the site item description citation. So people can go ahead and copy this to their clipboard, and it's available them to paste into their bibliographies, their footnotes, whatever they need to do, and edit it to make it right. If they come back to you, like a researcher comes back to you and says, oh, they got flagged on their citation because of how you formatted it, that's not a you problem, that's a them problem, because they should have known to edit it and not just leave it as is. So that's just something else to be aware of. I'm already going into future things here. Then you have the download PDF. This will generate a PDF version. Yeah. I have my settings set up to where I can save a PDF in a specific area, so that's why it's doing that. But generally, it will download a PDF. I'm going to save that. And you should be able to open that PDF. Now, the download of a PDF can take seconds or it can take minutes, depending on your server and the size of the finding aid. If you have hundreds of boxes in a single finding aid, so meaning like thousands of folders, potentially something like that, like it's a large finding aid, it could take a while. And you could be like, what's happening? And people using the public user interface may be like, what's happening? It's just because of the size of the document, and depending on what they're using, the browser or whatever, it could take a minute. So just make people aware of that. Now, you may have generated PDFs on the staff interface side. There are a few differences. It is formatted a different way to be slightly more user-friendly than the staff interface. I still prefer people to just look at the website, but if they're more of a print and read kind of people, you can tell them to download and print the PDF. And this button is only available at the collection level of the resource record. So you see it has, however you have entered data into the finding aid data portion of the resource record, which I can pull up. Let me go back, which I can pull up, and I'll show you that when we go to the staff only side. If you, in that finding aid data, you will see that you can enter information, and that helps to format this PDF. So if you, for us, we do similar thing where we say guide to, and we usually include at Georgia State University Library. And then they can see when this was created, what was used, what language it's written in, where it's from. They get a table of contents similar to the staff side. And then they get information, right, regarding it. They get all the notes. They are able to click on links to get back into certain points of the PDF, right? And they're able to see different information throughout the finding aid. So it's pulling everything from the finding aid online, right? And giving it to them in this format. So if they want to print this out and highlight things and do that, if that's just how they like looking at finding aids, like they're used to being handed a physical finding aid, then sure, have them print this out. They may request that you print it out before their appointment, but that's totally up to you on your side with policies and stuff like that. So again, you can download a PDF, but that's just at the collection level. This used to say, I think, just generate PDF, and people were confused why it wasn't just going straight to print. They have to download first, and then it goes to PDF. So depending on what version of ArchivesSpace you're using, the buttons may appear slightly different, but not too different. And then if you do staff only, if you have that button enabled, it will take you to the staff side and show you in edit mode the collection that you are currently in, right? So you're able to edit in real time this collection, and it goes through re-indexing and then is available again on the public side. Even while you're editing, it's still available on the public side, right? But your edits will appear after you save and it re-indexes. So if something was wrong with the collection, say, actually, we need to add a language because the language isn't like determined, right? We need to add that language, change it. There was an error in one of the files, something like that. You can do that. Now, as I said, if you want to change up how the PDF looks a little, you would go to this finding aid data section and you can edit. You can edit what the EAD ID looks like. So they have that. This is where the guide to is put. So you can add that. You can also add a finding aid title. As you can see, they have used some code in here, and you can totally do that in these portions of the resource records and most fields in the resource record. So if you're wanting to change how that first page looks a little and some parts of what it looks like on the site, you can use this finding aid data. and you can do more than what's required. Because if you leave this blank, it's probably just going to say the collection name and give you the language of description, right? And how it's written. So, because there's only 2 required fields of finding a data. So let's go back into this and let's talk about another button. So I'm going to exit out of all of this and I'm going to pull up my ArchivesSpace instance at Georgia State University. So very similar to what we're looking at now, I'm going to pull up just a random collection to show you what's going on. Okay, so you have the ability to add a request button. Okay, this request button allows your users to request various aspects of the collection. Now, if you enable it, its default is to be available at every level of a finding aid. So if you're hosting ArchivesSpace yourself, or if you are have a hosting provider, you can ask them to only enable it at certain parts of the finding aid, say at the series level, the file level, that kind of thing. So we have at Georgia State University turned it off at the collection level because we have collections with hundreds to 1,000 boxes, and we're not pulling all of those, right, for an appointment. So we need people to, we need people to not do that and just request at the series to file level. So let me see. Yeah. So if we go to a file in this collection, we get a button that says request this item. Now for us, this is going to take us to our Aon portal. Aon is a service, an application provided through Atlas. So if you are hosted with Atlas, you have access to Aon and you can have access to Aon through any hosting provider, but Atlas gives you some discount. So Aon is a portal to allow people to request appointments and materials through ArchivesSpace as well as through other applications. So that's what our request button does. So people go through the process of logging in, requesting the materials, scheduling appointment, all of that. Now, if I was to go to, let me see, my former institution, let's see, and look at one of their collections. Yep. And if you were to use the request button here, you would see that they have a form. Like it doesn't go to a different site, it's a form. The default for the request button is a fillable form. This fillable form is customizable as it's seen here. So there were fields added in. So the anticipated arrival date and anticipated arrival time were not default fields. And then the text was added in, right? So people could fill these out and request an appointment, and then we follow up. This form is connected to an email address. So you don't want it connected to one of your staff members' address, email address. You don't want it connected to one that is not monitored on a regular basis. So this one is connected to the General Archives email at the Atlanta University Center, Robert W. Woodruff Library, Archives Research Center, very long title. So the AUC, so they have it connected to this archives here. So when the request is sent, it goes to that email address. Staff members who check it regularly can see the email and respond and confirm that appointment, which we have the information up here, right? We will respond to your request and confirm. So just by filling out this form does not guarantee an appointment, right? Now, people, and when they turn on the request button, they generally turn it on to connect to Aon, but they can just use this form, right? There will be issues with spam if you use this form. I'm just going to say that. Just because people have access to it. This is a public interface. So I recommend you add a bot. They have reCAPTCHA here that limits the amount of spam that comes in. I think based on when they started adding it, spam went down and considerably to like almost nothing. I think for the most part, because it's identifying whether you're a human or not. So you can verify if people are human, and it goes through that, right? So I highly recommend considering if you're using the request button to add a bot like reCAPTCHA that makes sure it's not a spam bot sending things, unwanted things through that request form. And you're getting real requests, especially if you need to monitor the amount of requests and have that data for later on, right? You don't want the majority of it to just be spam. Making sure there's no questions. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm happy to answer. So let's get back to the collection level finding aid. So as Susannah mentioned, it provides all the notes that you would fill out in a resource records and make public, right? So the default in when you create a collection is to have the scope and contents or the abstract be the top note. You can change the order, but it defaults with the scope and content. If there's a lot of it, it will do the see more button. So as you can see, there are paragraphs of scope and contents here. And then it goes with dates. In the PUI, to make it more user-friendly, rather than just saying bulk dates, they say majority of material found within, and then give those dates. So if you choose bulk dates on the staff side, it's going to default with this text so people understand, because not a lot of people understand what bulk dates means. That's a very archival term, right? So when users look at this, they can better understand, oh, majority of these materials are dated 1998 through 2005. So just because it says 1992 through 2012 doesn't mean I'm going to find a lot in those other dates, right? And then people can see what type of agent the creators are or any other names associated with it. So they know that this is the organization and this is the donor or person. So if that information is filled out, like donor is added to the agent record, that will appear here. And if it's a person agent record, then you are seeing that here, right? And then language and materials appears here. And that's so people know that the materials itself in the collection are in this language, like majority in English, but not the description itself. That's in the finding aid notes, right? And they can determine that based on looking at it usually what language it's in, but just in case that note is there in the finding aid data. It goes through the notes with usually the biographical historical note appearing lower with copyright and usage information appearing higher. The full extent. So usually extent appears as physical description, but just depends. And then if you get further down, you can see the related names. So you can see subjects, so names as subjects, and then topical subject. It does break them down based on the type of subject. So if you have geographical, topical, format, whatever type of subject you've chosen from the subject side of on the staff side, it will break that down in this collection overview. And if there's a record group attached to it, that will appear down here in this information. Users are able to see what you put in finding aid data, so be aware of that. And it defaults to tell you the status, the authors, the description rules, that kind of thing. So be aware. So always make sure if it's supposed to be completed before going online that you've changed the status. If you want people to know who created it, have that in there, that kind of thing. So just be aware of that information. And if you have anything in your repository, like contact information, like fax number, phone number, email, that will appear here under repository details and under contact. Generally, people fill that out, but it's not required of you. And sometimes people just have a footer that includes that contact information. And again, when you're in the collection overview, you have this search. It's defaulted to be on and to search throughout the entire collection. There's also a default to have it appear, or an option to have it appear when you are in a file in a series. The default is to have that turned off, but you can turn it on for other parts of the collection. So let's look back at the overall collection. Collection organization, just like Susannah said, is a scrolling finding aid with once you get down into files, it follows you on the side. So the collection organization on the side is following as you go through. Let me do this. Yeah. So it will go to that. That being because not all information associated with these files appears in the scrolling finding aid. So this is general, like old like Archivist Toolkit and other like types of online finding aids that you would scroll through it, right? But not all information is here. It generally just includes where it is located, the box and folder number, dates, and then title. Like that's typically what's there. Notes, you need to click on to get notes. And most of these, and I'll go through this, have you can add specific notes to them and they will appear in their record. So let's go back up. And then container inventory. As Susannah said, this is one of the best ways, but specifically if you have the request button on and you need people to request based on box numbers. So for us at Georgia State University, we pull the whole box, right? Rather than just a folder from a box. So if you request something from box 1 and you want to see more than one folder in box 1, you're going to have the whole box available to you. So you don't need to keep requesting from box 1. So we click on box 1 and we can see what folders are in there and some information about that folder. You can even edit on the staff side when you are clicked on that. And that is editing the top container, so the box itself. You can edit the information associated with this box from the by clicking staff only on the public side if you have that enabled. So when staff only appears, it's specific to where you are in the public side. So if you're in a box, which is a top container, you're editing that. You're in the top collection level of a resource record, it's going to take you to that and you're going to edit that. And it tends to open in a new window, so this is still open to you. So if we click on box 5, you can see there's multiple, and you can see that it has 7 results, and you can see more information, and you can even click on the folders and see that. Let's go into a file. So let's see, correspondence 2000 through 2009. So if there are any notes filled out at the collection or series level, but those notes are not filled out at the file level or the lower level, it will come from that part of the collection and fill in here. That's like the default. So this, and it will say that it's from the collection. So people know it's not a scope and contents note about this specific file. It's a scope and contents note about the collection or about the series. You can always add your own for the different files, but it will pull, right? It will also, dates are generally required, so you will add dates, right? But it will also pull creators and languages. Now, as you can see, this has conditions governing access note. So this note is added to this file, and we didn't see that in the scrolling finding aid. So now you can see what this says. Open without restrictions, and there's like 75. If there's a specific like extent associated with this file, it will add it here, but it will also pull from the collection. It pulls a lot of information from the collection level or series level or sub-series level. Whatever is above it in the hierarchy, it will pull from that to add in that information. So it's not blank in this record. You can see here the physical storage information, and we know that this is in box 5, folder 4, and that there's mixed materials. And then it always has the same repository details for whatever repository it's a part of. As you can see, you can click on staff only here. And you can go directly to this archival object, so this folder in ArchivesSpace, and you can edit whatever is here and add information, remove it, change it, whatever you need to do. You can see the citation here as well. Citation will be specific to this item, this file level, right? So it will say correspondence, right? And box 5, folder 4, it will have all this information that we saw in the collection level, but now we have like the item and the physical storage information filled out, and people can copy that specifically because it's best that they get a little granular when they're citing archival objects, because it helps us out in the future if someone else wants to look at these materials and they're just like, I don't know, I want this collection, but they don't know what box or folder because the citation didn't provide that information. So we want them to have the citation at the file levels, right? At the item level. You can also download a PDF. That's not always turned on for series and file levels, but it is, but it will still just download the whole collection. It's not going to download just this item. So be aware of that. So let's get into digital materials, unless we have some questions. Okay, cool. Digital materials are our digital objects in the staff side, right? So if we click on one of these, say advertising, you can see what you can see the repository it came from. If you go back, and you're browsing, it has those breadcrumbs. So you can see the collection, the series, sub-series, and then file, right? It gives you all those breadcrumbs of how we got to this digital record, right? And you can see all of them here. So if you click on advertising, you get the identifier, right? And again, these identifiers have to be unique to the digital object itself. So if they want to find it again in the public user interface, they would need to copy this identifier. I don't recommend they be that long, but that's up to you. If you go down, you can see additional information. If there's a note, it's here. This just says advertising, and then it shows you the linked record. So if we were to click on advertising undated, we would go to where it is in the collection record. So now we're in Krispy Kreme Corporation records, and we see the file that it's associated with, right? So it's in box 7, folder 7. That's the original physical object. And you can click on advertising, and that will take you to the digital record. But if you wanted more information that's not provided in the digital record, you could go to the file record and see that. So this takes you directly to the digital version of it by clicking on go to file here, right? So we need, go back. So if we, same here, if we were to click on this, we could see that in any version. So this is the link that you provided in the digital object. So the URI that you have provided. So it can be the actual where it is online. It can be a link to a file and a folder on your server. Like it just depends. So this is the online. So they can go from here to download, view, all of that, depending on how it is set up in the repository that you've linked to, right? And then they are able to cite the digital records as well and go to the staff side and edit this digital object on the staff side if you have access to this when you're in the public user interface. Let's talk about unprocessed materials now. Unprocessed materials refer to your accession records, right? And it's not required that you make them available. If you are trying to gauge whether or not people are interested in this collection for research purposes, and you want to get the data of how many clicks it gets, how many requests people are making for it, you can have that appear here and have it as an option in the tabs, right? The tab menu up here. So you like the Black Student Alliance records, that's the non-processed materials. You get that plus the identifier, again, something that has to be unique. You get what repository it came from, and then it's not going to give all information from the accession record in the staff side. So it's important to be aware that the accession record only has it has for the general data, the basic data, dates and all that, one like checkbox for make public. Certain subfields have that option as well, but majority of the data you're entering into that record, there's only one checkbox to say make public. But it's not publishing all those notes. It only publishes some of those notes, but some of them should just be staff side. So it's going to give you the content description, what this collection is about, right? The types of materials, the formats, whatever you provide in this description. It's going to tell people what kind of acquisition it is. Is it a deposit, a loan, a gift, that kind of thing. The provenance, meaning who donated it. If that information is filled out, it's going to be here. It's going to tell people if there's restrictions, dates, and how large it is. And then it may be a few others depending on if those fields are filled out. This can also be edited, again, on the staff side, and people would have to most likely email you to see these materials, right? Like, so you can add a note into access, right? Restrictions note. There may not be restrictions, but you may want people to know, hey, email our general account to request these materials. I'm not fully aware if the request button is available at unprocessed material. So if Margaret and Susannah, if you know, please put that in the chat. But if it is, and it's probably, if not, it's probably something you can customize to be there so people can request that. For our unprocessed materials, we tend to just put up an inventory in our resource records, like just an inventory of what's in each boxes in our resource records, and have a note that says this collection will take 3 business weeks to process or 15 business days to process. So please request that much in advance, and we will work on confirming whether or not we can make this available. So they still have access to the request button, but they're aware of how long it will take for them to actually get access because all we have right now is an inventory and we need to review the boxes. So that's unprocessed materials. Very simple, straightforward. Because of how accession records are on the staff side, this does not have a lot of the hierarchy and the different levels, like different sub-records as a resource record, because it's not fully processed, right? You don't have as much data, but if inventory is available, you can link to it by providing it in the inventory field. And then let's get into subjects. Subjects are also very brief in here. So it provides generally the type of subject. Yes, it provides the type of subject, so genre form. It also tells you the subject resource. So this came from art and architecture, the source. If it came from a local source, it would appear there. And then it tells you what collections this is found in. So this is only found in Krispy Kreme Corporation records. It gives you a bit of information about that. And then again, you can click on that to see that collection. Like, oh, I want all collections with albums. You can get that from subjects and go there. Again, something that can be edited on the staff side. Majority of these records are something that will have the staff only button appear if that is on. And then let's see another one. Yeah. If, see, this one says Library of Congress subject headings and gives the abstract information, right? If you fill out the scope note for this subject, that will appear on the public side, right? So provide the information. There is no checkbox to make public to publish this, right? So as Susannah says, subjects appear on the public side. If you've created it and you saved it, it will appear. Even if it's not linked to a collection, a series, a file, whatever, it will appear. So be aware of that when you're creating subjects. Let's go back. And now let's talk about names. These are your agent records, person, organizations, families, software, that kind of thing. If you click on one of these, let's see, this is a person. If you've provided information about this person, as you've seen before, agent records are long these days. There's a lot of information you can provide, and a lot of this is publishable, like notes about the agent, description information, all this can be made public, and people can see that information on the staff side. So that would appear here in this record if it was there. See, this one's very short because it's not connected to any records so far in ArchivesSpace. And then this one shows one collection record, right? And that is an organization. Everything type of record and subrecords tend to have an icon, so be aware of that. And then let's talk about record groups. These are our classifications. So all the record groups for any of the repositories would appear here, and you can click on them. You can add a description to record groups, and when you're in the list of them, it would give you that description if it's available. You can see all the collections tied to it, and if there was a hierarchy to classifications, like sub-records to the top classification record, that would be shown, and you could see the different hierarchies. And you can see the collections and be able to click on them, and then you can edit this on the staff side. So that is basically all the different record types and how to use them and the various buttons that are available to you in ArchivesSpace. I want to leave some time for questions. So let me pause. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer those. And then after that, we have another break coming up, and then we get into customizations. So fun stuff, right? I'm going to give it another minute in case you want to put something in the chat. Just stop sharing for a minute. So reports about clicks. So that's usually something that you have to set up, like have Google Analytics or another application that you use for other websites, and set that up to get those reports. So I believe we use Google Analytics at Georgia State, if not for ArchivesSpace, but for other. So I recommend setting that up and seeing. Yeah, so next question is, I've seen institutions being able to insert their logo into the downloadable finding a PDF. Can you share how that is done? That's another customization that can be done. Generally in the configuration file, you would go into that code and add in having a logo in your PDFs. So I would look into that. And we're going to talk about more of getting into the configuration file after the break. So it does, so it doesn't default. Let me share my screen again. It doesn't default to that when you download it, right? But and I can see if my institution has that set up, but I'm pretty sure we don't. Susannah or Margaret, do you have that set up?
We do, but we also got a developer to help us customize our PDFs.
Yeah, so there is a way to do it, but again, it is a customization. Because just because we have, as you can see, our logo in the PUI doesn't mean it will add it to the PDF. So you have to customize. Let me see. I'm pretty sure we have something in the Q&A. Okay, so we have a question about record groups. How do I enter the specific record groups into ArchivesSpace, and how does that work with bulk upload? So there was a recent training on classifications, and since we have time, I'll take a minute to show you where that is. So if you go to the ArchivesSpace homepage, and you go to scroll down, you can easily see that they're a part of YouTube with this icon, and this will take you to their YouTube page. If you go into videos, they should be sorted by latest. So accessions assessment, it has not been uploaded yet, but there should be and you can request from ArchivesSpace itself a yeah, there should be a recording of a training that was done last year on using classifications. I believe it was a part of yeah, it was a part. I'll have to look into it. My voice is in there that much. So reach out to ArchivesSpace, um, ArchivesSpace home at lyrasis.org, I believe. And you can ask them if you can have a copy of that recording, which goes over how to use classifications. We don't have time in this training to go over how to create record groups, which are classifications in the staff side. But they are pretty simple to do. And the Help Center has documentation on how to use ArchivesSpace, how to use ArchivesSpace classifications module to create that setup, okay? And to make the hierarchy and everything like that. But of course, if you have questions, reach out to the listserv if you're a member, and people usually are able to answer those questions. Thank you, Margaret. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, it's time for another break. And then we will get into customizations and theming in ArchivesSpace, and I'll show you various institutions that have customized their PUI and what that looks like, and how you can get into doing that. Okay. Well, we're going to take a break. Let's see how far we are from 1:35. We're going to come back at 45 after the hour. So yeah, come back at 45 after the hour, and we'll get into customization and we will get started talking about customization. So let me share my screen and we will get into it. Okay, I'm going to back to the public side. So let's talk about customizations. So the staff side, the staff interface, and the public user interface can be customized for local use. More extensive customizations to both can be made by defining local files in the plugins folder of the application. Okay, so for the public user interface, it can be customized for local use by enabling the local plugins in the application's configuration file. So a lot of these customizations for the public user interface unfortunately happen within the configuration file, which means it can't just be done by you as a staff member, as a editor of ArchivesSpace on the staff side. Adding files in the plugin's local file folder, its code placed in this directory should mirror that of the core application and will function as an override to replace the function provided by the files they replace. Modifying these files and directory will require direct access to the application files on the server. So you either need to contact the system administrator of your instance of ArchivesSpace or contact your hosting provider to do a majority of the customizations that you would like. Most of these ArchivesSpace user-created plugins, a good number of hosting providers will allow you to add to your ArchivesSpace instance, but not all hosting providers will be able to add all plugins to your instance of ArchivesSpace. So whoever is in charge of your ArchivesSpace instance at your institution will need to contact your hosting provider if you use one to see if it's doable, depending on what customization you would like. Instructions for developing themes and customizations can be found on the GitHub site. You should definitely check that out. I can provide a link to that, or Margaret and Susannah, if you can provide a link to that site. There are many features of the PUI that can be customized within the configuration file. These include things like adding branding, changing the header, changing the logo, enabling human readable URLs, the notes that you have in your file and series records and the collection records, the buttons that appear in collection records. So I'm going to change what I'm looking at to show you. Yes. There is a text docs tech doc site for ArchivesSpace that talks about the public user interface and what can be done in the configuration file. So this website goes over that and how you can go to GitHub, which is part of GitHub, and see more information about what can be done. So when you're in the GitHub site looking at what can be changed and what defaults can be changed in the configuration file, you'll see the code plus comment. If it has a hash mark, it's comments. And then the rest of it that's in color, those are codes, right? This is a README file for that config. So it can tell you what this does, right, in the comments. And some of this is very tech heavy, and some of it is, okay, cool, want to do that, right? So I recommend reading through this if you're interested in what you can change, such as logos and branding, and even what the home page looks like. A lot of that is doable by your hosting provider or by you as a system administrator, if that is your role. The tech docs goes over various aspects like the main navigation menu, how it is displayed, changing badges on the repository page, so what that looks like, the request button, having that turned on or not, a lead paragraph, which I will show you what that looks like, but that's on the home page and what that says. Inheritance and what that looks like, and then archival inheritance. So I recommend reading through this and seeing what it tells you about ArchivesSpace. And then I want to show you the plugins page. So there are various plugins that you can use with ArchivesSpace. Those plugins depend on whether or not the system administrator or your hosting provider can provide access to them. So when you're in the ArchivesSpace GitHub, you can see the plugins site and be able to look at these. So Aon requests, that's a plugin that will allow you to link your requests to Aon, like how we have at Georgia State University. The LCNAF is the one plugin that is already in your ArchivesSpace instance on the staff side. So if we were to go to the staff side of ArchivesSpace, we would see that plugin. And that's just allows you to add Library of Congress name authority files and Library of Congress subject heading files to your ArchivesSpace instance. So you can see the various things that have been created, and you can read through these files and see what you would like to add, right? Let's see. Let's show you some plugins and some customizations that can be done. Yep. Let me change my share again. So many windows open. So on the ArchivesSpace homepage, if you were to go to About and click on who's using ArchivesSpace, you can see the members of ArchivesSpace, and a lot of them are highlighted in green. That means we have linked to their public user interface. And if you click on it, you can see those public user interfaces and see what they have done for this interface, right? So I'm going to show you just an out of the one that just kept it very simple. They added up here their logo, right? That's something that can be done in the configuration file. They have it where you can select the language. Again, something that it's not defaulted to do so, but you can change, and they can select the language of information here. I'm not going to change it right now. And then they just kept most of what came with the out-of-the-box ArchivesSpace. So they've kept what's generally at the top here, and then they added a paragraph to tell people about Drexel and the ArchivesSpace and what they're looking at, right? That can be done above the search or below the search, right? They also chose what tabs appear. So they only have repositories, collections, subject, and name. They don't have record groups, process materials, digital materials. Like, they don't provide access to that in the tabs. It does not mean they don't have those records, because you can create them and have them made public without having a tab for them on the public side. It just means they appear within these records and don't have standalone browse, right? So we can go into these, and if they were to have digital material, they would still be linked in here, and we could see that information. Interesting. They are updated to the most recent one, so we can see the collection organization on the left side, right? It's very out of the box, even kept the default coloring of ArchivesSpace, which is that white and blue and gray going on and black, right? And then we get into a different one. They've changed their whole homepage. Now, this is something that requires various plugins and customization, right? So their homepage includes an image that is clickable. And then the search, and then information, right? This is Hope College. When we get into the search, we see parts of what that we recognize as ArchivesSpace, right? But they still keep this banner up here, and they have changed the coloring, the background coloring. A lot of this is doable in the configuration files, but some of it will require a plugin. So if you have your own IT or a hosting provider, you could talk with them about this. That who's using ArchivesSpace is great for getting ideas of what you would like your public user interface to have. So when you go to whoever would make these changes and talk to them about it, you can provide them with examples and say, hey, I would like to do this. Is this possible, right? Because they've changed the colors of what collection looks like. This is not blue, it's a blackish blue, right? It's a navy-ish. And so you can be like, that's what I want. I want our institution's colors throughout, right? So it's branded as ours. They've even changed what these top buttons look like, right? So you can see collection overview and collection organization and collection inventory have a different coloring. They're black and gray, right? And even change the hierarchy. It's a nice customization. And then we get into the Culbertson's Archives and Special Collections, and they've made slight adjustments. But one of the plugins they added was to add live chat. So if people have questions, they can chat with them, right? And they are hosted by lyricists. So if that information is provided, you know, if you're hosted by the lyricist, you could potentially add this plugin to this and do that. If we look at University of Cambridge, they have added a help button. So they've done their coloring, their banners, all of that, right? They've changed how the font look, how the font color is, but they've also added this help button, which takes you to a research guide. Easy peasy, right? Not super difficult to do for the most part, but something you can request of your system admin or your what was I going to say, or your hosting provider. I would make note of what version of ArchivesSpace they are using, because the public user interface has been updated at varying times at various releases, right? And we're at version 4.1.1, and there have been updates since this version, which is 3.5.0. So remember that, and some of this may be slightly different. And remember that every plugin, every customization, everything you do to the public user interface has to be tested and maintained regularly. And the more you add, the more it has to be tested and maintained. So keeping it simple is sometimes best depending on your repository and your institution and what your other sites look like, right? If you want to maintain consistency throughout your websites and the pages you use, you may want to get into large customization, but it really depends. But it always has to be maintained and tested and in that code, but it will not change the core code base of ArchivesSpace. That will still be there. You're just trying to put a pretty face on it, right? And that will have to be in every update you do. So if you update from version 4.1.1 to version, say, 4.2.0, whenever that comes out, your plugins have to go and make sure they go in the code, right? And are there and can work with the new updates to the ArchivesSpace core code. So before you upgrade, you may want to do testing, have your system admin or hosting provider do testing with the plugins that you have with any release candidate that comes out of ArchivesSpace to ensure that those customizations are working and won't fail or cause issues with the core code base. So it can't just be done instantly. The things that can be done readily and easily are done in the configuration file, like changing the logo, which can be on either side, right? Adding some banners and text, like making it very easy to use and just straight out of the box. That's something that can be done rather quickly. There's also options to add in plugins, again, to your research guide and add links to digital collections. Adding links and adding this text here is very easy to do. That's, again, configuration file. And it could be top or bottom. Changing the color of the banner and adding in a banner is also something that can easily be done through that. But adding things like this box with the links to research guides, that will take usually a plugin. You can also choose whether or not it shows what's in a repository. If it's just one repository and you want people to know, hey, it has 764 collections, 357 3,557 digital materials and 2,500 names. That is an option that you have to add to this, to your home page. There's also this University of Auckland chose to add in images and links to those images. So if you were to click on this, it would take you to the record in ArchivesSpace. And so you could learn more about it. So they've added in the image and then they've linked it to the record in ArchivesSpace. So that's an option that can be done as well. The University of Tennessee at Chattanooga has chose to change the color of the background, right? Keep most things the same. They've added to their tab to include make an appointment, right? So that's a link they have. But then they've chose this browse. So you can browse by collection area, selected topic, social justice, like these kind of things. And if you were to click that, they've done the search for you basically. So that's the link they've added there. And then it just gives you all the collections. So you see the search that was done and you see all the collections that are a part of that. Something that you can also add, which is shown here, and I can show you in Georgia State, is you can actually have an image from your digital object. That's easy to do. Let me go to the. You can have an image from your digital objects appear as a part of for the searching and browse, but then in the collection itself. So this is something that can be done in the SAF side, easy peasy. Which, if you want to learn more about that, check out the digital objects reporting. But it's something that is a type of customization, but not something you have to go into a configuration file or a plugin to do. It's just something that's available to you. The Chinese University of Hong Kong Library has chosen to do a few updates. They've changed the colors of the font. So that is something that's easy in the configuration file. They've added this text and they have their logo again, and banner. That's easy to do in the configuration file. And then they've created these boxes that allow you to search based on type, like the repository. So it goes into that repository and allows you to search that repository itself. And then they add in information about searching and all of that. So that's an option for you. Again, something that has to be configured. And it's a code that has to be added. So again, another plugin. And then the University Archives the same. And then they have this carousel. This carousel is not clickable. If they're using the code I think they're using, which the AUC also has this carousel allows you on the SAF side. This plugin makes it where on the SAF side, you can link these images. It's just an additional module on the SAF side where you add links to these images and they appear as a part of this carousel, and you can choose whether or not this image will appear now, and you can add more images into it. So that's the carousel plugin that's also available in the ArchivesSpace plugins. These aren't clickable, so you can't click to see this in a digital repository or anything like that. It's just a nice thing to have to show the types of materials that you have in your collections. And then we have the Bodleian, or the Bodleian. They've changed the banner a little and the coloring and added text, but they also added images in the bottom. So similar to a carousel, but it's not like moving. They just have images situated there as thumbnails. So you can do that. And then they defaulted how people search, what field they search in. So you can change that easily in the configuration file, the default for search field and what that looks like, so that people search in that rather than something collections or keywords or something like that. And then we have customizations like a totally different homepage, like what Georgetown did, which it's still ArchivesSpace, but it's different. And they have changed the banner and everything. Again, updates to codes and stuff like that. They've changed the font and how it looks like, the colors of the buttons, but they kept the core elements of ArchivesSpace, again, keeping that collection, identifier, the scope and contents note appearing. And they've kept how it appears, like they have their buttons, but they also have the collection organization and it on the left side. So they are using most likely the most recent version of ArchivesSpace, but they don't have that available to you. And then their request leads to a form, not the out of the box form and not ArchivesSpace. So you can even link to a Google form, a web page you've created with the request button. Like you can do that if you don't use Aeon and you don't want to use the out of the box form that the request button has. You can link to a different form. Oh, yes. And then the Atlanta University Center has changed their banner. They've added in text here. And they also have the carousel plugin. They've also added a new tab. So you can add tabs to the tabs. So you don't have to use just the default ones. They've added an FAQ, so a help tab that goes through the various questions that people ask and also links to videos. I will say that I designed this and requested it through our IT contractor and told him what I wanted, and he designed it. So again, that's creating new code to add into ArchivesSpace, but it's not changing the core code base. So plugins, new code, and configuration files are generally what you're going to do to customize ArchivesSpace. And the more you do it, the more you have to make sure it's maintained and tested. I can't stress that enough. So these are links to videos that you can add in and do that, right? They don't have their version history. But you can change most things easily in the configuration file, most general things. And then if you want to get into large scale and a lot of customization, you will want to look at institutions like Yale and Harvard for what they've done, which they've had a whole team working on their public user interface, which is ArchivesSpace core, but they've changed a lot of aspects of it. So you'll want to look at what they've done, Harvard at Yale, to see what that's like. Okay. We'll go back to the general ArchivesSpace public user interface. And I'll answer any questions you guys have. I'm looking through chat now. Yeah, a lot of this is really cool. I will say that, but it takes time and effort. Just be aware of that. But like I said, review what's out there. Review what's on that who's using ArchivesSpace, their public user interfaces, and others that you may be aware of. I would stick to people who are using ArchivesSpace as their core rather than those using other applications, because you want to make sure it's doable with ArchivesSpace and not just something that's out there that's cool, but it may not be work with the code, right? And you want to make sure you're doing something that can be maintained by the current staffing that you have, right? The current host provider, the current system admin, because there's no guarantee you'll get new people. You don't know if you'll lose people. You want to make sure this is sustainable, right? Because even us trainers, we can't fix your instance. ArchivesSpace, the organization can't fix your instance if something goes wrong. So you don't want to like have to throw the whole thing out because you did too much customization. Just FYI. Any other questions? Yeah, Margaret, if you want to promote the Help Center, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I would just say about that I used to be on the user documentation sub team, so that's why I like to talk about it too, is just because I know how hard folks work on that. But even as somebody who's used ArchivesSpace for a while, it's something that I go to regularly because there are functions or things that you don't use all the time, or you might just be trying to explain something to a colleague, and it's just easier to go back to basics and use that information. So I highly recommend it. It's always a good place to start. I will say that one of the things we talk about often with our documentation is that it's agnostic. We're not telling you how to do things. We're telling you that things are able to be done. Like with classifications, for instance, that's one where we tell you the basics of how classifications can be created, but it's up to you to create your classification system and how you want to do it because everybody implements it slightly differently. So I know there was a question earlier about how to do that. I would definitely recommend because you have access to other people's instances of the PUI to see how they've used classifications. And then, of course, the classifications training would be a very good place to start as well. And with regard to customizing your PUI, here at VCU, we've been pretty boring. We had to add our university's banner and things like that for branding. But one of the things we did um, early on, and I'm always rethinking this, I'm like, should we go? Because I see all these uh, cool things that people are doing, but I'm like, no, taking into account what Brittany has said about think about your abilities, what you have. We are hosted through Lyricist, so we can put in tickets and request changes from Lyricist. But one of the things we did is instead of putting information directly on our homepage, is we have a link to a published Google Doc called Search Tips so that we could have some information about trying to do searches. But it also has our hours and things like that. And so instead of having to always go put in a ticket to get things like that changed, we can just go into the Google Doc ourselves and update that, and it's published. And so, there's little things like that that you can do to help make your PUI customized, but in a way that works well for you.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, that's good information to have. Yes, and if you're an ArchivesSpace center, definitely check out the Help Center and use the list serve, the user list serve. Ask your questions there. People are pretty responsive and helpful. And thank you for sharing your PUI, Margaret. Susannah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I am actually adding the link to my PUI as well, just so you can see what that looks like. And also, I just wanted to just, as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to get more of the simple config file PUI changes to be included in the staff interface side of things. So hopefully soon that will be a lot easier to adjust for your institution's needs. And also, I want to share one of my favorite examples of just how much information can go into an archive-based record. This is from MIT, and their um, agent records are kind of amazing. And
Mm,
so it's just a good thing to see how the people promote the information and their collections. So just passing that along too.
thank
Yes,
you,
I
Susannah.
do love the ability to add that kind of information to the agent records. I've done that for a few of ours, but I would love to do more, and this is a fantastic example.
Yes, definitely. Like you have all those fields on the staff side, and if you have that information, I would say use it because all of this, like these related names, they're linked. So now you can click on those and see the information about that name, that agent, and then be able to see what collections are in there. So just having an empty one doesn't provide a lot of data, right? Especially if people are searching based on names, like they know of a person they want to research. And having agents have this information gives them the topics, the people, places, events. It just it provides so much information, but it does take time and effort. So I thank you for sharing that, Susannah.
Yeah, that's in my aspirational folder.
I have so many aspirations for archive space.
So many.
Okay, so if there's no other questions about customization and theming, we can get into talking about what you can do for your staff and users of ArchivesSpace and the users of the public user interface, and how you can make it, more accessible for them without even customizing your archive space. Okay, so this doesn't require customization. It requires just a few things on your end, right? Susannah or Margaret, do you want to start?
For us, with the link that I shared with you, like our search tips are very much in line with what we collect. So again, just really focusing on our researchers' perceived needs. So we have the asterisk example is everything about films, filmmaking, filmmakers, etc. Just to really keep it within our scope. So that's one of the just very easy things.
Yeah, that's a good one to have. Um, I will say so when you decide, if you haven't already decided to use the public interface, or you're trying to think of how do I get people outside of the archive, say librarians, to be able to tell people how to use finding aids without having to contact the archivist. I do a training. So I've done trainings with my fellow librarians and archivists and go over, similar to how we did today, the different aspects of our public user interface and how they work. So when users come to them and they're like, I need primary sources, it's like, oh, check out our institution's finding aids, and this is how you search through them. So that's an easy step you can do. It's just host a training with the library or institution, like whoever may interact in your organization with finding aids and interact with users before you do, have them learn about it, right? Because they might not be super familiar with finding aids, right? So they may need to learn more. And then if you have the ability to create research guides and things that go over ArchivesSpace, let me see. I'm going to go back to the AUC. I have too many things open. Oh yeah. Can you guys see the AUC's help page?
Now,
No?
mm-mm.
Cool. Now we're there.
Excellent.
Okay, so at the top of this, besides just having a help page, at the top of this is a link to our research guides. So if you have the ability to create guides, I highly recommend it. And in that guide, add information about ArchivesSpace and how to search it. So this homepage goes over what the terms mean. Finding aids, as you all know, are not something that people just get, right? They're like, what is this? What does this mean? And so you need to explain what a collection is, what a series is, subseries file, even sometimes what agent records are and who people are and that kind of thing. So having a guide just linked on that homepage of your public user interface will allow researchers and users to just click there and be like, okay, or if someone's asking you questions and you don't have time for a consultation, or before a consultation, you can be like, read through this guide, tell me, ask me questions after you've read through it, that kind of thing. So this goes over all aspects that the AUC uses of ArchivesSpace public user interface, but it also has a PDF. So we created a PDF version that points to different aspects of a finding aid and what they mean. So if you can't do it digitally, maybe do it physically and have handouts readily available at your reference desk, including both the archives reference desk and the librarian's reference desk. So if they ever are like, how do I use finding aids? Here's a link or here's a handout that you can use. So these links talk about browsing, right? Searching, understanding records themselves. What does the collection overview look like? What does that mean? What's a collection organization? What's the container inventory? Series file records. And then they go over digital materials. They, they created videos that talk about searching for those digital objects, right? And what that means in ArchivesSpace. And then even with requesting materials, because depending on how you use the request button, it can be confusing, right? And even if you use Aeon, you may want to create a guide for how to use Aeon. So it takes some work, but it helps you in the long run because now people have access to different resources outside of ArchivesSpace that explains ArchivesSpace to them. Okay. So I highly recommend even if you don't have like say libguides, if you have the ability to create a web page to put a guide into that, or even the ability to create a physical guide, consider that. And when you're creating it, think about how it's not necessarily how an archivist would use it. It's how a researcher, a student, whoever uses your archive, how would they use it? And you may even want feedback from them about how to use it. I will say when I was at the AUC, we started out with I think it was XTF when I got there. And we were considering the public user interface, right? When they made a big update that made it much better. So I think which version 2.8, I think. So we did user testing with students and faculty at the AUC to see which they prefer. And we ended up with ArchivesSpace, and a lot of the additional stuff like this research guide, video, and the help tab were done because of that user testing, because ArchivesSpace had more user-friendly language and easy searching and ability to do quotations and asterisks and search like a Google database didn't mean users readily understood that. So through those focus groups, we understood we had to add additional information in some format. So that's what I got.
I basically second all of that, especially reaching out to your users, whether they're students, researchers, librarians, or faculty. I mean, it makes all the difference.
And I will third that. I have not done uh, training focused directly on our users, but I have worked with faculty and staff within the library to help them to understand what ArchivesSpace is and how to use it and the elements of a finding aid. I really like Brittany's guide. That is something that we aspire to do here. We've just not had a chance to do it yet. So that looked amazing, and might steal some of that from you. But yes, the more that you can educate folks about how these things work, the better. So take the opportunity when you can find it.
I'm just making sure all the links we shared are being shared with everyone. So does anyone have any questions before we wrap up for the day? I will say, I was a part of a panel for one of the ArchivesSpace member forums, I think in 2020 or 2021, that talked about ArchivesSpace for reference. It is available on the ArchivesSpace YouTube channel, and that provides you with information about using ArchivesSpace for reference. It goes over more in detail what I talked about with the research guides and everything like that. Um, but I highly recommend if you're going to use the public user interface, put in the work not just to customize it, but to help users know what they need to understand ArchivesSpace, because the back end is created for archivists and the front end, though amazing, and I am a biased and a champion for the ArchivesSpace public user interface, there's still language that people need to understand. So always having to explain things is fun, fun, fun.
And I just added a link to all of ArchivesSpace's um, webinars, trainings, and forums. So seriously, take a look at all that. You will find some amazing projects that other institutions are doing. And just as you see, even all of us have aspirational goals. And it's amazing how people are using archive space out in the wild.
Yes. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, we are going to let you go early, which we don't mind at all. Thank you for attending this training. Please fill out the feedback form, the link that you got in your agenda, and let us know how we did and what we can do better. We also want to hear from you about your use of the ArchivesSpace user interface. So please just let us know how you've been using it, how you would like to use it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.
Thank y'all so much.
Apologies, guys. I think some of our links were just being sent to us.
Oh no. Oh, yeah.
Ew.
Which is
Oops.
why I was recopying them and putting them in the
Yes.
chat.
Thank you for doing that. I was like,
Thank you for
oh,
noticing.
I'm like, should we send an email out to everyone and be like, here's all the links that we shared with you?
We can ask. We can talk to Jessica about that. Well, I will see you guys later. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, stop recording. Let's do that.
Okay.
Yes.